Allen Company and Big Al will be at the I-80 Truckers Jamboree. See you there.
WWII, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
The Texas Supreme Court just tossed out a $100 million nuclear verdict against Werner in a decision that could have wider implications. Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine stops by with the details on that, plus a look at the latest cross-border numbers, which are down for the first time in a long time. We are just 3 days away from the final broadcast of Landline Now after 20 years on the air, and we continue to bring you some of our best work from over those 2 decades. First, many times over the years, we brought you stories about truckers who have served their country or who drove a truck while serving their country. Perhaps the most famous role that soldier truckers played in any war was the contribution made by the drivers of World War II's Red Ball Express. We'll bring you an encore of Reed Black's 2006 story. Then, the flag is a special symbol to our nation and to our veterans, but some U.S. flags have a meaning beyond that, representing specific groups and their commitment to our country. One such banner is the Code Talkers flag, which honors Navajos who used their language to help the U.S. in World War II. But several years ago, that flag was nearly lost until it was found by a truck driver who brought it home. We'll bring you their story. Also on today's program, today is July 1st, when many new state laws take effect. And in 13 states this year, those new laws include changes in the fuel tax, and in the majority of those states, that tax will be increasing. Scott Thompson gets the details from our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We've got new cross-border numbers in, and we'll go over what they tell us here in just a moment. But before that, we've got a nuclear verdict to talk about with Tyson Fisher. Tyson is the associate editor of Landline Magazine, and he joins us now. Tyson, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
We have reported before on a, $100 million verdict against Werner in Texas. Nuclear verdict there. The state Supreme Court just overturned it, and we're going to talk about that, obviously. But before that, let's go over some of the background here, Tyson, on just what led up to that nuclear verdict.
Yeah, this comes to a pretty tragic, vehicle crash that happened on Interstate 20 in Texas. And so basically what happened, it was during the winter time. It was inclement weather, icy roads.
2014.
2014,
yep.
Yes, it was in 2014. And a pickup truck with several people in it, including 2 young children, lost control on the ice, veered into oncoming traffic on the divided highway, crashed into a semi, and then, tragedy struck. A 7-year-old was killed, 12-year-old quadriplegic. A terrible accident. Yeah. So that's what happened. Eventually, the family took Werner and the driver to court, trying to claim that it was their fault. I mean, that's the very basics of the story. So that was in 2014. The crash happened in 2018. A jury sided with the family and found Werner 70% liable and its driver 14% liable, but the driver of the pickup truck only 16% liable. But the point is, Werner on the hook for, about $100 million. Yeah. That was the district court or the trial court. And then in May in 2023, the state appellate court affirmed that. So really sent shockwaves across the trucking industry because this ended up being I would call the poster child of nuclear verdicts in the trucking industry. Yeah. Not so much the number there with about $100 million. We've seen far bigger since then, but because of how egregiously wrong the decision was because of the facts of the case, which is this truck driver did nothing wrong. And as a matter of fact, that is a quote from one of the troopers who was investigating on the scene as the investigator. He said, quote, "Didn't do anything wrong, and there was nothing the truck driver could have done to avoid the collision."
Wrong place, wrong time.
It's just wrong place, wrong time. It's just a very unfortunate incident involving an icy road. So obviously, Werner was not going to lie down on this one, and so they took it to the Supreme Court. And one of the things that was on trial here was obviously this is what we call proximate cause, where they direct cause of this. But they also brought up something that's called the admission rule. And what the admission rule is that once an employer establishes liability, which in this case Werner did, so basically Werner said this driver, this person was driving under the scope of his employment with us, right? Once an employer establishes that liability, evidence of things like hiring and training and other derivative things cannot be brought up during trial because it would be considered inadmissible and irrelevant because it would likely prejudice the jury. That was allowed, and that's kind of why we got to this verdict that we got. And so take us to where we are now. The Supreme Court finally ruled on that. And so what they did find was that this truck driver obviously did not proximately cause this crash, And because the Supreme Court ruled that the driver did not cause this crash, they decided to pretty much punt on the issue of the admission rule. So what Werner was asking was, the admission rule is not kind of like written into court precedent in Texas. And so some courts will use the admission rule, some courts won't. Werner wanted the Supreme Court to kind of make the precedents like we are going to use the admission rule so we wouldn't have this like reptile theory is what we call it, The Texas Supreme Court did not do that in this, but it did pretty much say we are really stretching the definition of what's proximate cause by saying that's the case here. And so we're going to basically reverse the decision. So Werner's now off the hook. So that's the good news.
Yeah, and I think it remains to be seen whether we'll see more of this. But I do think you kind of said it was a poster child for the nuclear verdict age in a way. It'll be curious to see how this may affect decisions moving forward and if we're going to see a domino effect maybe on other cases down the line. That remains to be seen, and we'll, of course, be following that. But again, I think this is one that really speaks volumes about the state of affairs out there as we've seen it over the past 10 or 15 years or whatever it's been now. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. I did want to talk to you before we let you go, Tyson, about cross-border numbers. We just got the numbers for April in, and we are seeing declines.
Yeah, this was expected. So April was the first year-to-year drop we have seen since last June, and it's the biggest one that we have seen since June of 2020, which is the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so the reason why is basically everyone's going to blame the tariffs here. Pretty much the short answer there. So we saw a surge in cross-border trucking in January and March as a response to the announcement of the tariffs and then the subsequent delaying of those tariffs. So what companies did was they front-loaded their import inventories in anticipation of these tariffs. And so by April, they had everything that they needed. Also in April, so a lot of these tariffs were put into place. Now, one set of tariffs that were announced were the global tariffs, 10% on all countries. That was put on pause. That will be lifted in July 9th.
That's what the president has said.
Yep. And then the president last Friday said that he does not intend to extend that. So this could be prolonged, this depression of cross-border freight. We don't know. But what we do know was that in April, we started to see the effects. So now it's kind of a wait and see because there's still a lot of uncertainty moving forward.
Yeah, the uncertainty is the thing that we've talked about with numerous people as being the underlying part of this that is really kind of weighing things down. Tyson Fisher, we appreciate your time as always. You can check out his work on landline.media. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Stephen T. Lyons of Merrimack, New Hampshire. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 45 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 338 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rotella, and if you're interested in receiving the Safe Driving Award, you can find a link to more information on our website, landlinenow.com. Next, we'll bring back Reed Black's story about the role a group of truckers played in winning World War II, the Red Ball Express. And we'll also share how a truck driver saved a missing flag that honored a special group of American troops. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
High heat and low lubricity can break your diesel fuel down fast. Summer driving means crowded roads, more stress, dust, and a bigger risk of costly engine damage. Howe's Diesel Defender protects from the inside out, cleaning, lubricating, and fighting injector wear. Visit Howe'sProducts.com.
Landline Now, thanks for joining us today. Memorial Day is the day we remember those who died serving our country. And while we sometimes tend to think of only the infantry soldiers who died, the dead in every war include cooks, medics, combat photographers, and truckers. Perhaps the most famous role that soldier truckers played in any war was the contribution made by the drivers of World War II's Red Ball Express. Landline Now's Reed Black has the story.
It was 62 years ago, the summer of 1944. The Allies had landed at Normandy, and 28 divisions began driving Hitler's armies eastward across France and Belgium. But the Germans were retreating much faster than the Allied command had expected, and the pursuing American and British forces soon outran their supply lines. Suddenly, Allied tanks, artillery units, and soldiers, who needed 20,000 tons of supplies each day, began running out of fuel, ammunition, medical supplies, and the food they had to have. Top commanders and logistics officers held an emergency 36-hour-long brainstorming session and came up with a solution. It was called the Red Ball Express.
Well, the Red Ball Express was an impromptu effort to relieve the pressure on supplies in Europe in World War II.
Vietnam veteran Stephen Anders is the Quartermaster Corps historian at the U.S. Army Quartermaster School at Fort Lee, Virginia. He says after the D-Day landings, the brass had assumed the Allies would advance 10 or 20 miles per day, an easy supply line to maintain. But Anders says it didn't work out that way.
That was the way it started, but it quickly got off track at the end of the first month when the Allies managed to break through the Normandy beachhead and commence a maneuver campaign, rapidly tearing across France in the direction of the German border. And that set off a chain of events that led to shortages all the way around. And hence the thoughts began to turn to the Red Ball Express. So at that point, all of the trucks that were available throughout the theater, what's called the communication zone, were commandeered for this operation, Red Ball operation. That included well over 3,000 trucks initially. And then in 4 or 5 days later, they were able to double that number.
The trucks were desperately needed because those 10 and 20-mile-long supply lines were suddenly hundreds of miles long, eventually stretching 300 miles. The trucks were the Army's famous 2.5-ton all-purpose cargo truck, otherwise known as a deuce and a half. And because black soldiers weren't allowed in most combat units in World War II, 3/4 of the drivers on the Red Ball Express were black. It didn't take the drivers long to rip off the governors from their trucks so they could drive full tilt. And while the Army planned to have each deuce and a half carry no more than twice its normal load limit of 5 tons, a single standard load of artillery shells put the trucks well over that limit. But Anders says that wasn't the military's original plan. He says the plan was for a very slow, orderly series of convoys.
So the convoys were set up with 16 to 20 trucks. Most of these would have been 2.5-ton, deuce and a half, as they were called, trucks. So 16 to 20 in a convoy. Their speed was to be 25 miles per hour. And this is where we say, not really. The truckers kind of set their own rules of the road. And we know, which is kind of humorous, because you can go to the Transportation Museum and literally see some film footage of Red Ball truckers. And you see the big sign that says 25 miles an hour, and you see them zipping by there. It looks like 40 to 50 miles an hour. So those rules weren't always adhered to. They should have had some shotgun riders, but they really didn't get that for a long time until fatigue became an overwhelming issue. So a lot of times these guys were driving solo. The trucks, which eventually there were over 6,000 trucks in use, really took a beating, and that began to show as the operation went into its third, fourth, fifth weeks, went 81 days in all. But the problem was they were overloaded, 50 to 100% at times overloaded, speed, constant use, lack of maintenance. When I perused some of the statistics to see what was happening, they were cannibalizing trucks. They deadlined over 5,000 vehicles, and it said during 1 2-week period there in the 1st of September, they chewed up 40,000 tires in 2 weeks. So it really was taking a toll, not just on the drivers, but the trucks themselves.
If the trucks were taking a beating, so were the soldier drivers. David Colley, who wrote the book The Road to Victory about the Red Ball Express, says the operation gave new meaning to the phrase driver fatigue.
They drove to the point where they were just kind of zombies, and they would frequently. This was one little anecdote that I always found funny and interesting, is that the convoys stopped at certain times. They just kept roaring on through the countryside, and they had an assistant driver. They were supposed to have an assistant driver, and the problem was that they would drive for hours and they'd start to fall asleep. And so the question is, how do you stay awake? And they had all kinds of different methods of staying awake. They'd lower the windshield and let the air blow over their face. And one guy was slapping water in his face all the time, taking his canteen and dumping it all over his face. But they would also rely on their assistant driver to keep them awake, and would actually switch positions while these convoys were roaring along at probably 40 or 50 miles an hour. They weren't supposed to go that fast, but they did. And so they worked out this kind of elaborate ballet where the driver would keep his foot on the pedal and kind of sit up a little bit, and the assistant driver would slide right under him and actually continue driving without losing any speed.
Each trucker had a rifle and was supposed to wear a helmet at all times. But the helmets usually ended up on top of the sand the truckers poured on the floor of their cabs to protect against mines. David Colley says many Red Ball Express drivers died in accidents and that others died in combat.
These trucks were being driven to the front lines. They would pick up their supplies at the Normandy beaches because all the ports were held by the Germans. And then they'd go in convoys as far as they could go, and frequently they were trying to deliver supplies to units that were actually engaged in combat. Or they would go through pockets of Germans, since the Allies were moving so fast at that time, that they would leave pockets of Germans behind, and the trucks would inadvertently drive right through these pockets of Germans, and sometimes they'd actually get out and have roaring firefights with the Germans.
The Red Ball Express only lasted 81 days, but by the end, more than 6,000 trucks had delivered a total of 412,000 tons of supplies to the front. David Colley says to him, two things stand out about the massive wartime trucking operation.
Two things that are fascinating about the Red Ball Express. One, it was about 80% black. Most of the drivers were black, and this is something that most Americans aren't aware of. And it was the one operation from start to finish that the black Americans, African Americans, can claim that they actually accomplished in World War II. And they about more than 1 million, or somewhere around 1 million blacks served. And they were discriminated against, obviously, terribly. So they never really had something to chew on. They weren't infantrymen. They did have infantry units, but they weren't particularly well regarded. And the Red Ball Express was a major operation that got a lot of acclaim, and it was essentially conducted by black troops, and it was a very effective operation. Secondly, it represents, and this is something that always interests me, it represents kind of the American way of life and doing business and doing war. And that was it. The Americans ran into a problem. They couldn't get supplies to the front lines. The railroads were all demolished. The ports were held by the Germans. There was only one way to get supplies to the front, and that was to truck them. And they took trucks from all over They confiscated them from infantry units, took them away from anti-aircraft battalions, and they collected, about 7,000 trucks. And they just kept these trucks going night and day. They'd break down, they'd send somebody out, they'd repair it right on the spot. And this is kind of a reflection, and it's one thing that the Americans were noted for in World War II, and that is that keep going. It was a highly mobile force, probably the most mobile force in the history of warfare, and it just put the Germans to shame. We think of the Germans as being the masters of blitzkrieg, but it was really the Americans who were the masters of the blitzkrieg in the truck. And some people say the tank led the way, but the truck frequently more so than the tank, because the truck brought the supplies and brought the troops up, and it was just kind of a very interesting picture of how the American Army operated during the Second World War, and it was conducted largely by black troops.
And Fort Lee quartermaster historian Stephen Anders says the Red Ball Express drivers distinguished themselves in a way that so-called rear echelon troops had never done before.
I can't emphasize enough how much they did distinguish themselves. Usually the support troops will be criticized because they're in the rear, or as they sometimes say, in the rear with the beer. But this is a case where the truckers were fully integrated. They were carrying the troops. Oftentimes, if it wasn't supplies, they were taking the infantry right into the fighting lines, and they were bringing back the wounded. They endured strafing, mines. I mean, the truck drivers were killed when they hit mines along those roads. So it was really a heroic effort. What's interesting about Red Ball is it caught the imagination. The media began to cover it. There were literally people from the media there in the field taking pictures, interviewing drivers. So they became, for the first time, support troops in the war kind of achieved celebrity status. Injuries and deaths kind of began to go up for these guys because they were trying to live up to their newfound status. So what they'd do along the way is they'd skip meals. They wouldn't take breaks. They'd ignore sleep, and they'd drive faster and take more risks. And indeed, you begin to see that. I'm still astounded by the immensity of what they did. They moved 500,000 tons of supplies. At the height of the Red Ball, it was 3.5 tons of supplies a minute, and I think they were true heroes. It's interesting to note that even before the war was over, General Patton himself had the quote. He said that the 2.5-ton truck is our most valuable weapon. And as for remembering these guys, World War II ended 61 years ago in Europe, 61 years ago this month. And those truckers played an amazing role in the defeat of Nazi aggression. It says, according to what I'm seeing now, there are about 3 million of these World War II veterans still alive today. But 10 years from now, they say that'll be about 500,000. So if you haven't thanked a World War II veteran, I'd say the time to do so is right now.
Our thanks to military historian Stephen Anders and author David Colley. For Landline Now, Reed Black reporting.
Thanks, Reed. All of us here at OOIDA and Landline Now want to send out a special thank you to all the veterans who have served their country. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At TruckStop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on TruckStop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Landline Now, welcome back. Robert Cruz has seen a lot. As a veteran of Desert Storm and a 30-year trucker, he's really seen it all, and much of it was hard. But sometimes Cruz, who usually goes by Andy, his middle name, also sees hope, good people, and even gets the chance to do good himself. That's what happened on a crisp mid-October day in Gallup, New Mexico, when the trucker and WWII member from Lebanon, Missouri, became involved in a story involving Navajo code talkers, motorcycles, fellow veterans, and a very special flag. It started with Jerry Hungiva, a wife and daughter of veterans, a member of the Navajo Hopi Honor Riders, and as of August 24th, the guardian of the Code Talkers flag, which is part of the Flags of Honor Escorts program. Each of the flags represents a group of veterans, in this case, the World War II Navajo Code Talkers, who used their tribal language to send coded messages. The Navajo Hopi Honor Riders, a motorcyclist group, brings the flag to events honoring veterans, including one October 16th in Gallup, New Mexico.
I was there for a ceremony, a Navajo ceremony, as well as a dedication that we had at the Comfort Inn Suites in Gallup. And there was a small group, 6 of us there, along with the person who did the prayer and the ceremony.
Following the event, Jerry fueled up at the Flying J at mile marker 39 for the 300-mile return trip to Flagstaff, Arizona. She remembers the flag being on her bike where it normally was. However, when she arrived for dinner with a friend in Gallup about 17 miles west, she discovered the flag was gone. Jerry shot back to the Flying J and started a search.
I rode my motorcycle back to the location where I last saw it and asked the store manager, nothing. We began looking for it that night. My friend, we went and got her truck. We got lights, lanterns, anything we needed to start searching for the flag. And I walked that night from milepost 39 to milepost 34. That's just about 5 miles, and didn't find anything.
She continued searching the next day with the help of other honor riders, but to no avail.
There's 3 of us searching Saturday morning, and still no luck. We didn't find it. So we figured, well, let's try again Sunday, and we'll get more people.
Enter Andy Cruz. He passed through the area October 16th, hauling his usual load of boats, like Trackers or White River Marine. He arrived at the Flying J shortly after Jerry left. As he approached the truck stop, he spotted something familiar in the road, an object shaped like a triangle. He realized immediately what it was.
Usually that represents a departed service member to a family member, and as soon as I saw it, I straddled over it by swerving right and then hard back left, so I didn't run over it. Then I stopped in the middle of the road, turned my flashes on, bailed out, and went back hoping it wasn't a flag. And I picked it up and I kind of hugged it, and I realized, oh, I'm blocking traffic.
The flag appeared to have been run over a couple of times, and he brought it back to his rig, swept the worst of the grime off, and put it in the jump seat. Later, inside the box, he found a ledger of where the flag had been, who it had been with, and veterans it had honored. He also found contact information. He tried emailing, texting, and leaving a voicemail. A little while later, the message got through to Jerry Hungiva.
Andy Cruz had left a voicemail and listened to it, and it was such a big relief because up until that point, I was emotionally torn, crying, and worried. What happened to the flag? Where could it be? Maybe somebody took it, but they're not going to return it. So many different thoughts crossing my mind. So it was such a big relief to hear Andy's voicemail that he had the flag and he found it.
By the time the two were in contact, Robert Andrew Cruz was all the way up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, headed for his home base in Lebanon, Missouri. Neither Andy nor Jerry felt safe simply mailing the flag, which had already been lost once. So one of them would have to make the 1,200-mile trip between Flagstaff and Lebanon. It ended up being Jerry. As Jerry and a friend made their way east, Andy texted her, explaining why the flag was especially important to him. Andy is a Marine, a Desert Storm veteran, and both son and father of Marines. His son Joel served in Afghanistan with his best friend Ricky, who Andy calls his adopted son.
They served in the Marine Corps together in Afghanistan. While they were in Afghanistan, there was an IED explosion that rattled some noodles, their heads, killed a Marine, and blew the leg off of another Marine and severely injured his other one. All who survived were suffering from it because I believe 3 out of all the Marines in that group committed suicide.
His son's friend Ricky died in July 2014. Joel died sometime later. Andy has a tri-folded flag at home from his son's funeral, the reason finding the Code Talker flag was so important to him.
I've got my own flag, my own triangular folded flag, and that's my son's. When I saw the flag, that's what it reminded me of. You know, somebody's loved one's flag of honor. They say when you fold up a flag, it's like part of their soul is in the fold. So you're to never unfold it. You know, from the funeral, I mean, that's basically what you take home with you, you know. That's your remembrance. That's your family honor.
Jerry Honjiva and her friends started out from Flagstaff October 21st, arriving the next night in Lebanon. As they drew near, Andy texted that he and his wife would cook them dinner. "Don't eat," he said. "I'm feeding you guys." They pulled into the driveway through some flags Andy had set up for their visit.
I'd set up a bunch of flags for them, you know, all the flags that my immediate family, you know, that we served in, and that was the Marine Corps, the Army, and the Navy. And then I had the WWII flag up, and I had them all up on the side of my little storage barn that's pretty close to the house. I keep my lawnmowers and stuff in.
The 2 honor riders drove up in full riding gear, chaps and all. Andy's daughter ran down the long driveway, waving a cell phone flashlight to guide them. They parked their bikes and took off their gloves and helmets. Andy and Jerry hugged and both started to cry. Andy said that as they embraced, it was as if they were feeling each other's hearts, as if they were friends reunited instead of meeting for the first time. Jerry felt the same.
Thursday night was the first night we met him, and it seemed like I knew him all my life. You know, just to hug him and finally talk to him, he didn't even feel like a stranger. It almost seemed like an instant friendship and an instant bond, really.
Inside the crew's home, Jerry recognized the importance of where Andy had the flag. It was on his son's saddle, something he said Joel thought of as his pride and joy.
I felt it belonged there. I felt my son needed to watch over it for me, you know, when I went outside and did some work or whatever I was doing outside. But I knew it would be safe. It was fine right there.
The tears began to flow again. In part, Jerry says, it was because that saddle was exactly where the flag should be. At all of the events attended by the Navajo Hopi Honor Riders with the flag, it arrives on a motorcycle. In fact, Jerry said Andy's truck was the first time it had ever been on more than 2 wheels. In Jerry's mind, it fell off a saddle, the saddle of her motorcycle, to come into Andy's hands.
And in my culture, you know, we call it the iron horse, and it's just like a horse for us. When you take care of your horse and you feed it well, you keep it in good condition, you have a safe ride. You know, it's a mutual relationship. When you respect your vehicle, you respect your horse. And anyway, so seeing it on his son's saddle meant everything. And I think for me to physically see it there and have that impression in my mind now, that gives me really good comfort that this is the way it needed to happen.
Both Jerry and Andy said they thought the flag had made the journey for a reason, that it landed with him for a purpose, that he was meant to find it, to meet Jerry. Jerry thought back to the ceremony at the Comfort Suites in Gallup, New Mexico, shortly before the flag was lost.
The person who had blessed all of us basically had said that, you know, the flag would be a healing element, you know, that the flag would be healing people that it came in paths with, and that it was to bring comfort to those that were holding it or being near it. So to me, that was really important. And I let him know that you know, that the flag has its presence there for a reason. And part of it it was for him to heal from losing his son, even though it's such a small thing, the flag, it was just very, very meaningful. And of all the places that the flag had been, which is now 13 states, the flag, in my opinion, the flag had found Andy at that time.
Jerry and her companion stayed overnight in a hotel room Andy secured for them in Lebanon. They came back the next morning to chat one last time. Robert Andrew Cruz presented the flag to Jerry Hongiva and saluted. Jerry returned the flag to its mount, only this time with some extra bungee cords for security. After a couple of side trips and sightseeing, she headed home. On the way back, she stopped for fuel near Gallup, New Mexico, where the Navajo Code Talkers honor flag started its unusual journey. And like so much that had happened, Andy said it was meant to be.
And I told them, I said, now the flag has made a full circle. Now the flag can go home.
The Navajo Hopi Honor Riders continue to bring the Code Talker flag to events honoring veterans, and it continues to help heal those who have experienced the trauma of war.
What the flag means to people all the way across the United States is really honoring our veterans, definitely honoring those who have fallen protecting this country. As we all know, that freedom is not free, and honor has no end. And sometimes I get somebody who will ask me, because I'm Navajo, they say, how can you love this flag so much, knowing that how many Native Americans were eliminated because of living here in the United States? You know, you hear about it in history of the different tribes that were massacred. And I said, really, I support our Navajo Hopi warriors, all the people who go into service. They're doing it for their family. They're doing it for their land. They're doing it for their culture. They're doing it for the future generations. So it's the exact same love that we have for our culture and our language and our tribe.
Meanwhile, Andy Cruz is back to trucking, his chosen trade of 30 years. He finds it therapeutic, being out on the road, talking with fellow drivers, his brothers and sisters, meeting people that he delivers to. Those things keep him going. Finding the flag helped him, but nothing can ever heal all the scars.
So each day I make it through is one day I made it through. When I go to bed, yes, I have nightmares. I have bad dreams from my military days. A lot of anger with God, anger with loss of my son, raising my son to know better than to shoot himself. And I still carry a shell casing in my pocket from the pistol that he shot himself with. Just a reminder.
Finding the flag did help Andy cope with that, as did meeting Jerry, and it's something that will remain with him from here on.
I'll never forget. In all the years that I've been driving, nothing is ever like this much of an impact on my heart.
For Landline Now, I'm Mark Reddick.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At WWII, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to WWII.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. July 1st holds meaning for a number of reasons. It's Canada Day for one. It also marks the first day of fighting at the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, and 100 years later, the introduction of the zip code system, and a year after that, the signing of the Civil Rights Act. But for Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, July 1st means fuel tax changes across the country, and he joins us now with a rundown. Keith, you got this circled on your calendar every year, I think.
You know, I'm glad that you went through those historical events here, being on the microphone, because that's what it's like to just talk to you on a daily basis. You're always given historical facts.
Am I? Sure. All right, we'll go with that. Why not? But yeah, this is something that you know, all joking aside, you do circle July 1st on your calendar because this is the day when a lot of states put these changes into effect.
Is it? I'm trying to recall. Is it a common day? Yeah. No, it is. It is July 1st, January 1st. Fuel tax rate changes. It is the time for that to happen this year, as it is most years. About a dozen states have fuel tax rate changes for July 1st. By and large, almost all of those are because they have it set up to make regular adjustments based off of inflation.
Right.
And then this year, we had a couple of different states that actually approved fuel tax rate increases. So, it's combined. You've got a baker's dozen states this year that have fuel tax rate changes.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of these here, some increasing, some decreasing. We'll start with California, where I'm going to guess that the rate is going up.
Yeah, as is always the case there in California, again, an annual deal. This year, just very minor changes based off of what the excise tax rates are doing. About a penny plus increase there for both gas and diesel. What has been making quite a bit of headlines there in the state is what state regulations that are tied to the fuel tax, what they're going to do. There has been speculation that it could be upwards of like 50-cent increase that could be really, in the end, what folks are going to feel at the pump. More likely expectation is that it's going to be about another 5 cents to 10 cents increase at the pump than what people have been paying.
Yeah, that's not nothing. Better than 50 cents, I suppose,
Yeah.
but 5 to 10 is still quite a hike there for sure. Moving to the north just a little bit, Washington State, what are they up to?
Yeah, Washington, one of those states that enacted legislation this year that included a fuel tax increase, a very large transportation bill there in Washington that was signed here recently. So their fuel taxes are up over the course of the next couple of years for diesel. There is a 6-cent increase this year for gas. So it's going to be about 55.5 cents for gas starting July 1st. For diesel, they've cut in half that. The first increase is 3 cents. They're going to have an additional increase in 2027 of 3 cents. So as of the first of the month in Washington for diesel, it'll be about 52 cents a gallon.
We are 2 for 2 on increases with fuel tax rates here. Let's see if we can go 3 for 3 here. I'm going to guess Colorado is doing the same here.
Yeah, about a nickel. They have multiple components to their fuel tax. Fees are included with this. The fees are going up there in Colorado, about a total of about 4 cents from what people have been paying for both gas and diesel.
A state you and I have talked about quite a bit in recent years as they were trying to figure out how to deal with their own fuel tax situation. Our home state here, Missouri, they did approve, I guess, a number of years back, right, kind of steady increases over the years. July 1st, we're getting another increase, it looks like. I think this is maybe part of the plan all along, or what's that look like?
It is. Yeah. We've been talking about this, for about 5 years almost.
Feels like 50, but yes.
Yeah. But what they've done is they, back in 2021, back when the fuel tax for both gas and diesel was 17 cents, they increased the rates by 12.5 cents over the course of 5 scheduled increases, so 2.5 cents each year. So this is the final rendition of that. So the tax is going to be increasing from 27 cents to 29.5 cents.
And that's the end of this one. That doesn't mean that down the line they're not going to increase it again. Or, I mean, I know that conversation's always happening in Jefferson City.
Yeah, what was approved back in 2021 did not include for annual increases thereafter.
Okay.
So they would have to revisit that, which, most likely they will at some point.
I imagine they will. All right, I'm not keeping count anymore, but I think we're 4 for 4
We're
maybe on
halfway through,
increases. Yeah, but Illinois, another state, looking at this issue, and let me take a wild guess. Also going up.
Yeah, about a penny for both.
Okay, not as much as the others.
It is worth mentioning. This is a regular increase since 2019. The legislature there approved it. Back in 2019, they had the diesel rate was 21 plus cents. It's going to be almost 56 cents now with this latest increase. Gas was 19 cents back then. Now it's going to be coming up on 50 cents. So significant increases there over the past 6 years. And Illinois increases that, as much as they've gone up there in Illinois, are about the same as what the states of Colorado, which we mentioned, and Missouri, that had a significant increase here over the past few years, as much as they currently collect is how much the tax has increased in Illinois over the past 6 years. So, high fuel taxes, obviously. Truckers well aware of that in Illinois.
Yeah, and with fuel going up, it's only going to add to the pain there. Again, negotiate a fuel surcharge into that contract. If you haven't done so already, now's the time to do that. I think we're going to break the trend here. Looks like Connecticut is actually going the other direction.
Connecticut, one of those states that from time to time, the diesel tax rate does drop, and it does drop by a noticeable amount. But on the other hand, when it increases, it usually increases by a noticeable amount. Yeah, this is all related to rules that they have in place tying the diesel price only, not gas, but the diesel price to the average wholesale price there from the prior year. So I mean, if the average price was down, then the fuel tax rate for diesel is going to go down. Starting July 1, it's going to be equate to about a 3.5 cent drop, so it's going to get back under 50 cents a gallon there for diesel. Again, worth mentioning that the excise tax rate on gas there in the state of Connecticut at 25 cents has not changed for now 25 years.
I'm looking at your story on landline.media. It seems like Connecticut is the outlier here. At least one more state we'll talk about is Mississippi, and they're going to go back to breaking our trend, I guess, or starting a new one here of a state that's increasing the rate.
Yeah, Mississippi, like we mentioned, Washington earlier this year, enacting a rule, transportation funding rule. Mississippi's massive tax overhaul bill that they did there, it included an increase to their fuel tax for both gas and diesel. What they've done is over the course of multiple years, they're going to have a 9-cent increase on gas and diesel excise tax. So the first increase is taking effect July 1. It's a 3-cent increase, so the tax is going to go up from 18 cents to 21 cents for both gas and diesel purchases there in Mississippi. We're
not going to get to all the states here because we don't have a whole lot of time left, Keith, but any other states out there that kind of catch your eye, for being noteworthy, maybe another state that is putting rates down?
There are some other states out there where the increases that they have are about a penny, being like Indiana, Kentucky, Nebraska, Rhode Island, as well as Virginia. The only state that has a decrease among those is Maryland. They have about a penny dip in the price per gallon. So, yes, it is definitely not common to have a fuel price drop, but we do have a couple of states this year, Connecticut with diesel and Maryland for both gas and diesel.
And there you have it. You can check out Keith's story on this if you want to check out if your state's on the list at landline.media. Keith, we appreciate it as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
And that's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in to Landline Now, and thanks for all you do out there to keep America moving. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.